Hello to everyone. Welcome to our Network Society MOOC series. Our webinar today will try to provide you with all the necessary components that you need to have in mind in order to better assist your clients in writing a good impact section while elaborating a Horizon 2020 proposal. Therefore, in order to better address this, we will try to provide answers to two main questions that must be analyzed in the best possible way by the applicants, which are: what impacts do you expect from your research idea, and how you plan to maximize the impact of your proposal? Under these two questions, hints for important aspects like dissemination, communication, and exploitation, IPR, open access, and others are explained together with important documents, websites, and other information that you need to have in mind while assisting a client to better tackle one of the most important parts of a Horizon 2020 proposal. Enjoy our webinar.
Hello everyone, welcome to another one of our webinars from the MOOC Network Society series. Today the topic of our webinar is about telling you and sharing with you all the ingredients of how to write a good impact session, or at least to know the tricks and bits and cover all the basics of your impact session. Usually clients comment that the impact session is the part that they find the most difficult one to tackle. From the evaluation point of view, it also seems that this is the part where, and also the section that statistically most of the proposals have the lower marks. So it is quite a challenge, and we want to address these issues together with our clients. Now, our idea today is to cover two main points, and we will deconstruct the issue of impact point by point, and we will present you the first issues, the main issues to be addressed. So first of all, we will cover exactly what impacts are expected from your research idea, and the second part, how will you plan to maximize the impact of your proposal. So let's start covering each one of these sections individually. So in what concerns the first point, what impacts are your research idea expected to create? Let's see. So first of all, you need to start, and before you start, you need to answer two main questions. First, are we talking about a first stage or a two-stage proposal? And what kind of action are we talking about? Okay, the expected impact is of course what you are expected to tackle, but you need to keep in mind that this largely depends on if we're talking about a CSA, we're talking about a research and innovation action, or an innovation action. For the two-stage proposals, for instance, you only have to tackle the first bullet of what's the expected impact in terms of templates when you submit the 10 pages, okay? So let me share with you the template of the proposal. Here you have impact and expected impact. Please know that the first 2 points apply to all proposals. And of course, the point of any additional impact, which is explored, it is the last paragraph that you can see in the screen. It should be included when we're talking about a research and innovation action or an innovation action. Okay. Now, what is important here is to describe the real impact of the project idea. When you are describing this, surely you need to correlate each one of these impacts from the project with what is expected and what is listed in the call and the topic. Of course, it will be ideal if you find a way, and if your client finds a way, to measure these impacts. It would also be helpful for the evaluators to realize the potential impact of your project by categories. It really helps those reading. So for instance, are these impacts social, economic, scientific? Why does the European Commission has to fund this project? How is the European Union overall benefited with this project. And of course, this last question is of utmost importance because we are talking about Horizon 2020 projects, and their impact absolutely need a European dimension. So you need to reflect this throughout the project and specifically in the expected impacts, okay? So you might know this, Net for Society has prepared a fact sheet titled Increasing Impact to explain what is impact, specifically in terms of social, economic, academic, and why it is important. And so please use this fact sheet when you are preparing the meetings with your clients, but also send this information when you are sending additional material or information to your clients. This is particularly useful and is very straightforward in the advice that it provides. Okay? Now, you will also need you are advised to quantify the impacts as much as possible. For example, you can do this through elaborating on a set of key performance indicators, which we usually know as KPIs. And this can be, example, like a number of scientific publications expected at the end of the project, number of collaboration agreements with industry, amongst different possibilities, okay? As a challenge, Societal Challenge 6 NCP, you must have in mind that when it comes to our impact and the impact created by projects in our challenge, we are talking mainly of scientists, researchers, companies, which are very close from the social sciences and humanities field. So impact is naturally and very closely related with reframing debates around concepts or approaches, changing minds, changing practices, either institutional, personal, social, or even defining new legislation, influencing policy making. So you need to create measures that allow you to explain how you're going to create this kind of impact and change. Now, you have also to be honest. Let me go back here in the presentation. You have to be honest with any obstacles and barriers that exist or may impede the full implementation of the expected impacts, or even at least determine the level of the risk and how these risks can be tackled or addressed. Now, as we mentioned, for research and innovation actions and innovation actions proposals, you can go beyond what is listed in terms of expected impact. And if you believe that this will further boost the innovation or the impact, either being political, social, economic, of your proposal. Furthermore, depending on the specific proposal and the specific action, this is mostly relevant for innovation actions. You need to, clients will have to convey an understanding of the market potential when they are developing their products. Remember that innovation actions are about developing products, or at least creating pilots to test. And we don't necessarily need to talk about, an object like a material. We can be talking about a service being provided, and in that sense, you need also to advise your clients to think about their market potential. Okay. Finally, it is important also to understand that the listed impacts, what you're saying that you will be able to do, need to have a clear relation with the objectives that you have defined under excellence. Otherwise, the proposal will be made of, it will be like a little bit of patchworking. You need to make sure that all these sections are related. And it is clear that the objectives allow you to achieve the impacts. Now, moving on to the second part of our webinar, we will address the issues that we need to consider when we are planning and we are considering ways to maximize the impact of the proposal. Now, of course, this is what it is said in the proposal template. And if you have already seen the proposal template, which I assume you have, you will see that you will have to indicate specifically the measures to maximize expected impacts in what concerns dissemination, communication, but also in terms of what can be exploited beyond the life of the project. This means that the Commission expects the inclusion of a plan on how to disseminate, communicate, and exploit the proposed project's results. As the European Commission clarifies on the proposal template shown now on screen, applicants need to describe in a concrete and comprehensive manner the area in which they are expecting to create impact and who will be the potential users of the results to be achieved. Okay, the plan should also consider how you will use, which will be the appropriate channels and how you will use them to disseminate the information and even interact with potential users. So here, you really need to be as precise as possible and include a list, a mapping of potential users and also potential uses. This will give you a good idea who would be interested in using either the results or the product that you are developing. So uses like commercial, for future investment, environmental impacts, etc., are of course relevant, and you need to emphasize this and clearly mark this in the proposal. Now, as a tip in terms of how you're going to include this in your proposal template, tables are always a good idea because they allow you to be systematic and to clearly write in a very straightforward way the main messages, okay? And this, by using tables in the template, you will show the experts clearly the level of impact and how this relates with the proposal and the objectives. Now, for Societal Challenge 6 and SSH projects ideas, societal impact, it is of course of absolute importance. And you can try to stress different ways by which this impact can be maximized. And a common way to address this, or at least to tackle this challenge, is to include relevant stakeholders during the project. Including engaging with these stakeholders in a continuous way throughout the project and even after the end of it is also vital to guarantee that each one of the results of your idea is being put out there in the community to be used and therefore creating impact. I will stress again, the Net for Society fact sheet stresses this and highlights how these issues can be tackled. There are, however, other resources that you can also explore, and I advise you to do that. First of all, to prepare yourself for any meeting that you are going to have or training that you're preparing on the topic, but also if you want to send more information to your clients. Now, the IPR Help Desk created a document on how to increase impact with a good communication, dissemination, and exploitation plan. Okay, and I'm going to explore this and share this with you so that you can see in terms of the contents why this brochure is relevant. Well, first of all, if we explore, let me go to the table of contents, you will see that in this document, one of the biggest issues are tackled in a very straightforward way. You might need to add, a little bit more detail or adjust it to the speech or the specificities of your clients. But the fact is that the main questions and concepts are here, and you can check them out. So, for instance, either the question of why should I care about communication, dissemination, and exploitation, to the definition of what communication is. And I find this table particularly relevant, to give a good example of what are the different, not only of the different purposes, but also what relates with this in terms of audience, and also all the legal obligations related with this. Sometimes it is like a last resource that you need to use when you need to raise awareness or some topics with applicants, and you need to stress some obligations. So it's good to have at least an idea that this is there are articles in the grant agreement which foresee this. Now, another issue that I would also advise you to read carefully is here. Which is the focus of these different concepts, because they are in fact different. And understanding their focus allows you to advise better in terms of when applicants need to bring this to their proposal. Okay? So there are, of course, and besides this, Dandelion project, which was a coordination and support action of a project that basically had as a mission to create an overview of the projects on SSH and Societal Challenge 6 in different topics, and they created a lot of supporting materials that can be used when someone is preparing a proposal. So here you have, for instance, if you go to the website and you look for the communication guides and how to maximize impact of SSH projects, you will see a lot of examples and tips, good tips on how to do this. So I strongly advise you, first of all, to check out this material, see what's mostly relevant for you, and on top of that, see which kind of materials would you send to your clients. Now, moving on to exploitation. In what concerns exploitation, planning is crucial in an Horizon 2020 proposal, and you would need to address how these results will be explored in the future, even after the end of the activity, or how you will translate them, transform them into marketable products, processes, services, or any other potential that we consider to be relevant. Now, keep in mind that you will need to provide a plan, and you are advised to include that plan in a level that is proportionate to the scale of your project idea. So it also, of course, depends on the type of action that we're talking about. It is fundamental that you advise your clients to include the opportunity of updating this planning during the lifetime of the project. We all know that when the project starts, unexpected things come along. There are opportunities, shortcomings, and sometimes adjustments need to be made. So be sure that that applicants have in mind that during project implementation, they might need to go back and make some adjustments. Okay? Now, this plan has the fundamental purpose of showing the experts that that the clients know what they're doing, and they know how they will maximize the impact of their proposal. Sometimes, and depending on the action, it's mostly for innovation actions, you will also need to consider in this exploitation, as part of this exploitation plan, a business plan. And so, and business plans, we are not very familiar with this kind of demands in our societal challenge, because these are mostly required when we're talking about a project which is high on the scale of the technological readiness level. You have heard about probably the TRL scales. So it is not very common for us to find a strong emphasis in our proposal, or even strong presence of, strong, robust business plans. But basically what these business plans are all about is to address, tackle, mark the market potential of the idea, as well as relevant business opportunities, and show that they have a strategy to take the product, the service, whatever, to the market. Now, there is a very useful fact sheet from the IPR help desk to describing how to plan, disseminate, and exploit these project results. Besides the other one that I've already showed you, this fact sheet is detailed. It is from 2015, but the main topics and issues that it covers are still very, very relevant. If we explore this, you will have important hints to create your proposal. Now, let's look again into the proposal template. It's good to always come back. We usually say to applicants that, there's a lot of description in the proposal template, so they tell you exactly what you need to do. And you should also stress this to your client. There are different requirements. Different parts of information are expected to go into different places. So the first tip is, if applicants find themselves doing a lot of copy-paste during the proposal when they're writing, something is wrong. Okay? Now, in what concerns the exploitation, dissemination, you need to consider that there's a strong emphasis on how the data generating during the project implementation period is going to be managed. Applicants are advised to prepare a table and include it here to detail the types of data being generated, why the standards, how it's going to be exploited, accessed, verified, stored, reused. Of course, if the data, imagine if you're working on sensitive data, then perhaps you cannot make this data available, you cannot publish. And in this case, you also need to explain in the proposal why you need to, close this kind of data. Now, in what concerns data management, curation, and preservation, we all know, we have all heard about the data management plan and how this should be included, at least as reference, from the start in the proposal. Our advice is to include the data management plan in the implementation as a deliverable, which will be provided in the first 6 months of the project, once it starts its implementation. And then it's a document, a deliverable, that it will be updated during the project. Now, this will be the topic of our next webinar, so I will not go into much detail now, but just to cover the basics, keep in mind that the European Commission has developed a template relating to data management, and you can find more detailed information about this on the Horizon 2020 online manual. Okay? Now, please keep in mind that related with this, you need to advise your clients to develop a strategy of knowledge management and protection. And here I want to stress two fundamental concepts that they need to be carefully balanced. Of course, first, you need to include measures related to open access to peer-reviewed scientific publications, and you will have to specify which model you will be following, like green or gold open access. Remember that in cases that applicants select gold open access, publications must be deposited in a repository. There's information out there regarding these specific issues. We will not be taking a lot of time here, but keep this in mind. And please keep also in mind that the costs of open access are eligible in terms of budget. Okay? All of the open access rules become obligations written in the grant agreement. So this is, of course, fundamental it is fundamental to raise awareness with applicants that they absolutely need to cover this. Okay? Related with this, in the policy of open access, you will have, I would say, on the other side of the coin will be the safeguard mechanisms in terms of intellectual property. Okay, so you will have to put in place a plan or steps to address the challenges related with the management of intellectual property. This is crucial to address even in proposals like ERC, which we are talking about mainly one host institution, one institution, but this is of course fundamental when we are talking about proposals being implemented in a consortium. Okay, so IPR management needs to be elaborated in detail, and it needs to be clear that applicants have a specific strategy on how to manage these issues. Okay, and of course this is greatly related with the impact of the project. So you need again to get into detail, and depending on each beneficiary's role in the action and what they're going to create or to produce, you will have to address the different intellectual property rights established. Okay, again, a table is always a good idea, because it is a systematic way, a very visually efficient way to convey the main messages before you go into more detail. Okay, now make sure and keep this in mind. Just as much as your clients will continue to explore the results after the project ends, that means that intellectual property arrangements that you'll do will not only cover the duration of the project, but also after the project ends. Okay? So exploitation strategy and IP management need to be connected. And this, of course, will be understood as a way to maximize your project's impacts. Now, as you can see, I'm a huge fan. We are a huge fan of the IPR help desk. There are other materials that you can use, and you can check on the specific topic of IPR help desk. You have a guide, and you also have a fact sheet from 2015 on these topics, which we will not cover here, but we will receive the presentation, and the presentation will have all the links that you need to explore these topics. Okay, so keep these in mind before the project, when you are advising your clients, and at least pick some fundamental concepts that you need to stress and convey from the start with the applicants. They don't know you don't need them to know all these fact sheets in detail, but you, at least from the start, they need to be aware that IPR will be something they will have to address, and that there are materials to help them do this. Okay? And then let's move on to another issue which appears last, but it's not, it's not because it's not as important as exploitation or dissemination. It is communication. Okay? Of course, communication is of vital importance. A good communication strategy and plan, and a continuous promotion of the project activities during its implementation and after the end of it can ensure the optimum results. At least it can enhance the visibility of the results, so it needs to be addressed properly from the start. Okay, let's just look into what are the requirements in terms of the proposal, and we will move from then as we have done before. So in what concerns communication activities, again, you will have to identify the measures that you will be developing throughout the project. And of course, these measures need to be proportional to the scale of the project, to what you want to do, okay? Now, for you to have a good communication strategy or plan, you need to put audience. What are your audience at the center of this exercise? What you want to communicate, and what's your goal, your objective, your purpose, and what are the measures. They cannot be simply detached from the audiences you will be engaging with, okay? So make sure that you have these audiences clearly identified, and the means of communication that will be used to further publicize the project and the project's findings are adequate to reach out to these audiences. Please inform your clients that when they are designing this, they need to have in mind the answer to the question of why they're targeting this audience. If they are able to reply to this question, I would say that half the job is already done, because they have understood why it is crucial to guarantee that the message gets to these people. Okay? Now, besides identifying the audience and the channel to reach out to them, it is also crucial to define the timing for each of the communication activities. So you need to be precise as possible. You need to look into the timing in terms of implementation of the rest of your project, and then plan your communication activities accordingly. Okay? Now, again, the Commission has developed a lot of materials to guide applicants, including the recent challenges in terms of how to use social media to communicate your project's results. There's even a webinar about the communication and the communication impact of your project. And so all of this is like, they work like a step-by-step guides on how to handle the different issues related with communication, and also in when concerns social media, social platforms, how to handle accounts, or how to build your audience in social media, and after that, how to measure the impact and performance of your communication in social media. Now, as we are approaching the end of my expositive part of this webinar, if we wanted to convey you an absolute crucial concept that you need to pass on to clients, that the word would be effective. So you stress this as much as you can, because you need to have an effective dissemination strategy, an effective exploitation strategy, an effective communication plan. So if you make sure that if your client looks at what they come up with and they believe that their plan is effective, we would say that that they are in a good way, in a good path to assure that they have a good plan to create impact with the project. Okay, so we have now just covered the basics and what concerns application. Keep in mind, we have told you this before, you will have to adjust this message according to your client's experience and needs, and also on the type of action they are designing. Another suggestion that I would also like to give is to consult the evaluation criteria, which are published in the European Commission website, and these can be used as a reference to show to your clients the importance of having a good impact session to make sure your project is funded. And keep in mind that when we are talking about innovation actions, the impact session weights more than the other criteria. So it might make the difference between your project being funded or not. Thank you very much for your attention, and we are now open for questions. And so we don't seem to have questions at the moment. And then let me just share with you two stories that come, of course, from my own personal experience, which refer, so it will be two opposite stories. The first one is about a proposal which had a very straightforward, I think they scored almost 5 in their impact section. I think it was 4.5, something like that, because they were able to clearly identify and create an image from the start in the project, which created an identity for the project, and then they moved from there to define what they wanted to do in terms of communication, and they had very clear from the start which was the impact that they wanted to create, and they built the proposal around that. Sometimes we know that researchers tend to look at the process of writing the proposal from a very straightforward way. They start with excellence and then they move on to impact. And sometimes it is very challenging for them to then go back to understand that perhaps the objectives that they wanted to work with are not the best ones to achieve the impact they are expected to achieve. But then sometimes it is very hard to make this adjustment. And what I learned from this consortium was that having the impact they wanted to achieve very clear from the start guided the definition of the objectives, and then of course the preparation in terms of what their dissemination, exploitation and communication plan. So it is a good practice. It is not always easy to convey this message to applicants, but from my experience, if they start from the impact, they will overcome a huge barrier that we still see in proposals, which is matching the excellence with the impact. And then I can share with you the other side of the coin, which is a consortium. They had a very, very good impact session, but their excellence part was not as good as it should. So they had a good impact session in the sense that they were detailed. They provided a plan. They had timing. They gave, in terms of form, in terms of what a plan is about, they had all the items there. But because the excellence part was not defined in a very detailed way, it was not very consistent, that limited their impact session, of course. And this serves to tell you that, again, you cannot assess, impact will not be assessed alone. It needs to be related with the other parts of the proposal. So keep this in mind, and even though it is central to make sure that you have all the items in the checklist to have a good plan and strategy, you still need a good idea and a good frame to work in terms of excellence, and that will allow you to have a good impact session. Okay? So I don't think we have questions at this moment. So I would thank you again for being with us, and I'll see you next time very soon with a webinar on data management plans. Thank you so much.